Hey guys, if you want to start a podcast, you've had the idea rolling around in the back of your head, but you're not quite sure where to go, head on over to buzzsprout.com. There's going to be a link in the show notes of this episode. Go down there, click on that link, get over to their website, check it out. They make everything so quick and easy to start a podcast. They get you on all the major podcasting networks, Apple, Google, Spotify, you name it, they'll get you on there. They have quick, easy setup for monetization. I started making money after my second episode, I think it was. So, go check them out, create an account, follow the link in the show notes to get you there. They will help you in any way they can to get you up and running. They have great blog posts, YouTube videos, everything to get you going. So, check them out, follow that link in the show notes, and get your show on the air. Hey guys, welcome back to Behind the Arrow. I'm your host, Paul Clinton. This is episode number 12 today. On today's episode, we had Joey from Herring Branch Whitetails back on. We had a pretty interesting conversation about some of the most debated whitetail deer strategies or topics, like the October lull, whether you should hunt cold fronts or wait till they're gone, all that kind of stuff. There was a whole bunch of questions we had, and we got Joey's opinions on them. I chimed in with some of my opinions. It was a great conversation. Make sure you stick around, check that out. I hope you like it. Make sure to subscribe to the podcast, give us a 5-star rating, share us with your friends, all that fun stuff. I'm trying to grow this and get as many people listening as I can. Make sure you head on over to Instagram. You can find us under Foresight Outdoors. It's Foresight_outdoors, I believe. That's our Instagram page. You can follow along there as well. So stick around, check out the episode. It's a great show. Hey guys, welcome back to Behind the Arrow. I'm your host, Paul Clinton, here again. We got Joey back from Herring Branch Whitetails. How are you today, Joey?
Pretty good. How about you?
Not too bad. Just getting things all ready. It's our Thanksgiving here in Canada, so getting ready for that and be taking part in those festivities after we record this episode.
That's always fun.
Yeah, man. But on today's episode, so we were talking there through the week, and you came up with the idea to put some lists together of some of the biggest debated topics or strategies, I guess, for whitetail hunting. So we both put a list together, and we'll just go through the list today and give our opinions on each point that we've come up with. I think that sounds like a good way to get this going. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, that sounds good to me.
All right, so I got your list pulled up here, and the first topic that you have on your list is what wind directions are the best to hunt and what are the worst. So what's your take on that?
So, the reason why I put that is, I hear a bunch of people are like, you got to hunt north winds, but the way I see it is, and from what I've experienced, is that deer move the same, especially mature bucks, they move the same no matter what direction the wind is coming in. So this is where guys that use saddles or that use climbing stands have an advantage. So what I like to do is, if I have a buck that's moving from, say he every single day he moves west from his bed, the only wind that you cannot hunt that deer is a wind coming from the west. If you're north of that deer, the wind's not going to bust you. If you're south of deer, the wind isn't going to bust you. If you're east of the deer, the wind isn't going to bust you. So, personally, in my experience, through a bunch of like my close friends that have used the same strategy, and me personally using it, it really doesn't matter what wind direction you're hunting, as long as you know where that deer is traveling and adjust accordingly. As far as the worst, there's always going to be that. No matter what you do, there's always going to be the one wind that you cannot hunt, and that is the wind coming from the direction that the deer is heading. Because if in order to hunt that deer, you have to be in front of it, and if the wind is coming from the direction the deer is heading, that means you are always going to be upwind from him, and that is the only wind that you cannot hunt.
Yeah, so like where I hunt, I got a couple stands set up, and I know where the bedding areas are. I know where they're trying to head out to feed. So depending on what wind direction I have that day, it kind of plays into what stand I'm going to be using to try and get them. So I have a couple things set, a couple different areas set up, and like you said, depending on which direction the wind is blowing, it'll depend where it'll make my decision of where I'm going to sit to get the wind to go to my best advantage. I really don't think there is a bad wind to not go out and hunt, that type of thing. So, all right, next on the list that you got here is morning hunting or afternoon hunting better?
All right, so personally, like for that question, it can be like in two different ways. So personal preference, I mean, I'd rather hunt in the morning just because, you know, I just like hunting in the morning because then if you shoot something, you got all day to look for it and you're not looking for something in the dark. But as far as actual like deer movement wise, it depends on your property. So there's really not a clear answer to that because my own property, for example, one year the deer will be moving around like 9:30, 10 o'clock in the morning, and then the next year they won't move till 4 in the afternoon. So really, you just got to this is where cameras come in, big play, is you just got to know your property, know when the deer are moving, and then that's really when you should be hunting. I'm the kind of person to where I would rather, you know, go out to the stand at 9 o'clock in the morning because they're moving at, say, 11:30 noon, rather than just sitting there all day because I don't know when they're moving. So it's not that I don't like sitting out in a tree. I just like to be the most effective that I can in the least amount of time. So really, I think there's not one is better than the other. It depends on your herd.
Yeah, for sure. Like right now, we got bucks moving on my property, but they're not moving until about 3:30 in the afternoon. You catch a glimpse of them, and then again, they come back through right around like 7 o'clock, right just before dark here. So I still go out in the mornings. I just like being in the woods, and if I get that lucky break and one comes through in the morning, that's awesome. But I make sure that I'm definitely back in the stand by no later than 2 o'clock if I do come in for a break in the day. But yeah, it definitely comes down to the herd and what you're finding on your cameras. I run about 4 or 5 cameras on our property right now, just different paths and different corners of the property to try and make sure I got the knowledge of where they are and when they're moving and where they're moving to help my stand set up. So, how
Right.
many cameras are you running?
Right now I'm running four. Yeah, right now I got four out. I got two set up on basically like eight-way intersections of a whole bunch of different deer paths, and then I got two on bait piles right now.
Right on,
But
right on. And bringing up bait piles, that's the next question on the list: is bait piles or food plots?
so um, if you have the right material to do a food plot right, then food plot every single time. So, like, I actually did a video on this, and for all the listeners, you guys can check it out on my Instagram, at HB Whitetails. Um, so there's a big problem with bait piles and food plots is that neither one of them are done either right or done to their full potential. So a lot of the times, and it drives me crazy when people do this, is they'll have just an open hay field, and then they will just you know kick some dirt around and just throw corn in that field, when in reality making a food plot isn't that hard. Everybody thinks when they hear food plot they're like, oh, you need tractors and you need this, you need that. You really don't. Some of the best food plots that I've ever hunted over were just little, like, 30 by 30 areas. You don't really need anything more than, if you want to go fancy with it, gas powered rotary tiller from Home Depot or Lowe's. Cost you like $100, and then other than that, just one of those little hand spreaders. So you don't need a big 4, 5, 6 plus acre food plot. You just need something little, and not a lot of people take advantage of that. Or what they will do is, like in the video that I talked about, they'll have an open field, but they'll plant clover, which doesn't need a bunch of light to grow. Which, yes, clover is a good food source for them, but if you have the light, then why wouldn't you take advantage of that to grow radishes or to grow turnips or peas or something that needs a bunch of light that also is very nutrient packed for the deer, and also the deer just like, because there's not much of them out there. So I guess the answer to the question is I would choose food plots, but bait piles, they do have their purpose, but you just got to do each one of them right.
Yeah, I had a plan to get some food plots in this year. We got some open fields, but a lot of hardwoods where I am. So we're gonna clear out, knock down some of the weeds and whatnot. We want to do some food plots, but with COVID and everything, kind of put a damper on that. So I'm just hunting bait piles this year, but they are working, they are effective. But I definitely want to try the food plots and see if I can get that to work, and more or less just for a learning experience for me. And if it works out, it works out. So
Yeah, I mean, like I said, bait piles. I mean, the deer that I've been hunting the past couple years. I mean, I got him coming over a bait pile. I mean, he's one of the smartest deer that I've ever hunted. But I mean, if you do either one of them right, they both work just as good. You just got to make sure you're doing it right.
yeah, I'm definitely going to put a lot of research into that, and maybe have some conversations with you and how you would like to do your food plots too, and get that down for next year and try and get those in the spring.
Yeah.
All right, so next here we have um, uh, hunting cold fronts before or after, or does it matter?
So it kind of doesn't matter. So deer, they can sense a pressure drop, and whenever you have a cold front, or I mean any front really, um, about 2 to 3 days before that front comes in, the pressure starts dropping, and the deer can sense that. But the thing is with the deer is they don't have televisions where they can just turn on the news to see what's happening. They just sense the pressure drop and more or less are like, oh, I got to go get ready. You know how like humans, whenever there's a giant snowstorm coming, we go and get the bread and the eggs and the milk and all that. Well, the deer are doing the same thing. They're going and getting as much food as they can before that front comes, because they have no clue what's coming. They can just sense a pressure drop and that there's something coming. So, um, yeah, it really doesn't matter, because even when that cold front comes through, those deer are still going to be moving during that. So the about 2 to 3 days before the front and the 2 to 3 days after the front, they'll probably be a little bit more active, because the first couple days they'll be getting ready for the front, and then the next couple days after that they're recovering from it. So they'll be a little bit more active, but they're still going to like during the front they're going to move the normal way that they normally move.
Yeah, for sure. I love getting out right before a cold front comes in. I definitely see the activity pick up. I do like to watch the weather and use the weather to my advantage as much as I can. And it's one thing I've always believed is get out right before that cold front hits. And I've seen a lot of movement then. So, can you shoot bucks in October?
Yep. I mean, I'm not one of those guys that believe in the October lull, as people call it. It's one of those things where I think the reason why people call it the October lull is because deer, when they when the velvet is shedded off their antlers, the testosterone levels in those deer rise, and basically it's causing the deer. It's more or less like how human teenagers go through puberty. That's what the deer are going through at that moment. They don't really know what they want, or where they want to go, so they're just kind of all over the place. So you might have in September, you might have 4, 5, 6 shooter bucks on your cameras, but then come October you might only have one or none, because they just they just go sporadic and they just sparse out. So, but the thing is you have to be knowledgeable of what your neighbor's properties are like. So the way I like to set my properties up for the quote unquote October lull is being the only sustainable food source in the area. Because that if you do that, then no matter what the October lull thing, the deer are going to be there because you have the only consistent food source. Because at least around here, um, by the time the first week of October rolls around, all the cornfields and soybean fields are either cut or they're about to be cut. So if you can provide them with that consistent food source, you're going to have deer that are just going to stay on your property, and then all the other bucks from other areas that just kind of spread out, they're going to pour into your property. So in simple terms, yes, you can.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, if you can get that good quality food and be the only one around, it'll definitely bring them in, even if they're betting on other people's property. From what I've seen, is with that food, it'll always make sure they're on your property to eat. So, back to the front situation. Do you hunt only cold fronts, or are you an any front kind of guy?
I'm an any front kind of guy. Like I said, about the other question is the deer don't have the television like we do, where we can see what's coming. All they can just sense the pressure drop, but they have no clue what's coming. For all they know, it could be a cold front, or it could be a blizzard or a rainstorm or a tornado. They have no clue. So they just got to be prepared for anything that's coming their way. So that's why I'm an any front kind of guy, because I've hunted before rainstorms, I've hunted before snowstorms, I've hunted before blizzards, and they all act the same way. The first couple days before the front actually hits, they all just are up, moving around, getting prepared. So I'm an any front kind of guy.
Yeah, for sure. I found that too. I'm not a big fan of hunting in warm weather if you got a big warm front coming out, but I'll still go out and try and catch the movement.
Yep.
Are late season bucks a waste of time?
No, actually, some of the biggest deer that I've ever shot, and also some of the biggest deer that some of my clients have ever shot, and also family members and friends have ever shot, have actually been in December, January. So the reason why is because, and this is how I really honestly gear my properties towards is, yeah, I provide them with the food source during the October lull to where I get basically all the deer in the area on my property, but I really gear it towards that. Really, January is when I gear it towards, because by January a lot of people have given up, because a lot of people just have the mindset that late season bucks are a waste of time, or it's too cold for them, or they just don't want to continue putting in the work that's necessary in order to grow big deer and attract big deer. And that's what I gear my property towards, is I provide that late season food source, because by that point all the soybean fields and food plots are either picked over or dying. Same thing with the cornfields. And then a lot of people, if they're doing a bait pile, they come late December, early January, they just kind of give up on that. And if I'm the only one in the area who has, it's the same idea as the October lull. If I'm the only one in the area that has food, the deer are going to be there, because the food levels have just basically diminished to nothing by the late season. So, personal opinion, that's my favorite time to hunt, is late season. I'd hunt late season every single day over October or November any day.
So to get them there in the late season, if you're running a food plot, do you have anything that you know of that'll sit there and grow and still be a viable food source in the middle of winter?
So it depends on the area. Here in Delaware, um, we don't really have a like cold winter. We'll get like a couple days where it's like 30, and it'll snow an inch or two, and then the next day it's like 50 degrees. So we can get away um, with like a chicory or a clover plot that will last through, say, February. But a lot of the times, what I like to do is run food plots. Not food plots, bait piles. Um, in the late season, and that's because, I mean, a lot of areas, especially where you are, I can imagine January's really cold.
Oh yeah,
Um,
yeah. I don't know what it equates to in Fahrenheit, but in January usually sitting around -20 Celsius here. So
Yeah, so you've got about a 0% chance of getting anything to grow up there.
yeah,
So if I mean, so down here we can get away with it, but up there you can't. So, but anyways, even here I still generally run bait piles because you want so late season you want to run your bait piles like you would in early spring. After it's because late season, it's after the rut and those deer are exhausted from chasing does around, and they need to, pack on some fat, gets a lot of protein in them. So I'm running a bunch of protein supplements, mineral supplements, then other things like corn, and I'm just running basically, honestly, basically the way I do my bait piles, late season and spring is if you go to Walmart, Cabela's, Bass Pro, any of your outdoor stores, and go to the hunting aisle where all the corn and stuff is, and just pick one of everything. That's basically how I more or less run my bait piles, and it works because not only are you providing them with the nutrients that they need, but you're also being different than your neighbors because there's so many people that run corn. Like you could have a corn pile here, and then your neighbor has a corn pile, then his neighbor has a corn pile. But if you're running one of everything, the deer are basically guaranteed to be there.
yeah.
It's more expensive though. That's the only downfall to it. But I mean, it's deer hunting isn't cheap.
No, it's not at all. It's one of those things. Once you get hooked on it, you kind of some days wish you didn't when you look at your bank account.
Exactly.
Yeah, in the late season, I like to make sure I get mineral blocks and stuff back out too. Help them re-energize, so to speak, after the rut when they've beaten themselves up pretty good. But moon phases. What do you think about moon phases?
I'm not really a big moon phase guy. I some of the biggest deer uh that I've shot, because I do my best at, uh, trying to pattern these deer, and I normally am pretty good at it. But some of the biggest deer that I've shot, they didn't follow moon phases, and the deer that I'm hunting right now, that I've been hunting for 2 years now, it's a really, really nice, massive mainframe eight. He's probably about a 4.5 year old right now. I could send you a picture of it later, but so in my experience with mature bucks is they're kind of mature bucks are about the same as like elderly already retired humans. You know how like your grandma and your grandpa kind of go, and they'll go to the store this day and then the casino this day, and then they'll go and visit on this day, and they just kind of go as they please. Mature bucks are kind of the same way. They kind of just they're at the point where they're the top dog. They're king of the hill. They kind of run that little area. They kind of just come and go as they please. So moon phases, they don't really care about them. So I'm not a big moon phase guy.
Yeah, I've never looked into moon phases in my life. I don't even know different phases of a moon, to tell you the honest truth. um, how to hunt the morning and evening thermals.
So the thermals, like traditionally, everybody's like, oh, in the mornings the thermals are rising, so you have to be in a stand, and then the evening they're lowering, so you got to be on a ground blind. Um, well, I've killed deer in a ground blind in the morning, and then killed deer in a stand in the evening, so I don't really think that they play too much of a factor unless you are hunting fronts. When you're hunting fronts and that pressure is dropping, that's when the thermals play a lot more. They give a lot. They're a bigger factor when you're hunting fronts. So really, I don't really pay attention to it at all. I mean, the only time I really pay attention to it, like I said, is if I'm hunting fronts. But even then, it's still kind of iffy on if I'll pay attention to it.
Yeah, I've never even thought of that, to tell you the honest truth. Whenever I think of thermals, I always think of like hunting in the mountains, as you got thermals coming off the mountain, but it's pretty flat where I hunt. I've never even put any thought into it until right now during this conversation, to tell you the honest truth.
Yeah,
Having
it's one
being
of
blind.
those things. it's one of those things. I mean, it really doesn't do that much. So like where I hunt, everything is um the advantage to hunting a high pressured area, which there's not really many, but one of the only advantages is that when you are tending to a food plot, or you are putting out more bait on a bait pile, or checking cameras, or whatever you're doing when you're in those woods, yeah, like whenever you're walking through it, you might bump a deer or two, but and yes, they'll run away, but in a sense, it's actually getting them used to you, because I have these three does at this one stand that I hunt, where every time I hunt, they know I'm there, and they just don't care, because that basically, when you're hunting a high pressured area, they get used to you, and then with the thermals, they they start to get used to your scent, and over time, with the three does that I was just mentioning, they know they're not going to get shot. So like they'll come into this bait pile that I have, that's probably 35-40 yards from the stand, and they'll look right at me and just not even care. So that, I mean, that's one of the advantages of hunting a high pressured area with the thermals, because it just kind of gets them used to it.
Yeah, that's pretty. I never thought of that. That's actually some really good info. Is around me, it is pretty high pressured as well, but they still haven't got used to us. I am on private land. We got two or three of us that run around out there, but I got busted by a doe last week when I was out. They're still not used to us there yet, but
Yeah, it takes a while for them to get used to it. So basically, like what we do is, um, so for our bait piles, we generally, like whatever we're gonna put out, whether it's corn or soybeans, sunflower seeds, anything that we're going to put out, we basically fill up a 5 gallon bucket of everything that we're putting out, and we put 1 5 gallon bucket out every single week. So basically, that gets us in there, and because also for us, I mean, our trail cameras, each one has a couple thousand pictures on it, every single week. So I'm going through like 9,000 pictures every single week, so I don't really want to let it go any longer than that. But then also, it just gets us in there. It gets them more or less like how like cattle and other farm animals are. They are starting to associate us with food, and it's worked for me so many years. And a lot of people think that it's crazy that deer will never associate humans with food, but I'm telling you, if you get out there once a week, and I'm not saying get out there and just walk around your whole entire property. I'm saying get in there, go to your bait pile, dump the bait, leave. I mean, if you just that little bit gets them used to the little bit of scent that you're going to leave, because even if you spray down, you're going to sweat, or you're going to miss a little area that you forgot to spray. You're going to get scent out, and that little bit of scent is going to get them used to you and associate you with food.
yeah, the biggest thing, even with those sprays, is I spray all my clothes down, I spray my boots, all that kind of stuff. But your biggest thing's still your breath.
Yeah.
They're always going to smell your breath no matter what. There's no way to kind of cover that up with a natural scent to try and throw them off. So just being out there, like you said, yeah, that's really good advice. And just get them out, or get yourself out there just a bit and let them get used to you. I never thought of that. I'm glad we're having this conversation. The other one on the list here is opinion on the common hunt woods in the morning and fields in the evening strategy.
Um. So I've never really been a big fan of it. I mean, at least for most people growing up, besides kids nowadays, and like the basically from the early 2000s and 90s and back, we didn't have all this YouTube stuff that you know told us, had a whole bunch of scientists on it telling us what to do and all that stuff. So it was just a common strategy that a bunch of, like, my grandfather used and his dad used. I've never been a fan of it. So it really depends on your area. Is because a lot of these things and that's the other thing that I don't agree with all these wildlife biologists and land management specialists. Um, is a lot of things that they say, they're like, oh, you have to do this and you have to do that, and the big thing about hunting and specifically land management is it's very situational. So, because basically, however you run your land is based upon how every other property around you is ran. So, but the hunting in the woods in the morning, if you are if your say your property is all woods, right? You don't have any fields on your property, but say the property line is a woods line, and um, your side is the woods, and then the neighbor's side is an open field. Now, if it's an early season hunt, say September, October, and say your neighbor has a cornfield, I don't care what you do, the deer are not going to be on your property because if I was a deer, why would you move out of that cornfield? Oh, because every single deer in that area is going to be in that cornfield because they can bed down in that and not be seen, but then they can also just sit there and eat the corn. Quite frankly, if I could, I would lay in bed and eat all day and do absolutely nothing. I mean, who wouldn't? Um, so, but if you the same scenario, you have the woods, your neighbor has a field. Say that field is just a hay field. There's not, there might be a little alfalfa, um, or rye like mixed in that hay field, but not really a good food source for them. So the only thing that they're going to use that for is bedding at night. So during the day, they'll be in the woods, basically the whole day, and then in the evening they'll return back to that field. So if that's the case, that's when that applies. Is the whole hunting woods in the morning and fields in the evening because they'll be returning back to the field to bed down. But it all just depends because say another scenario, say that field is soybeans. um it depends on the soybeans because some years here we have soybeans that can get like almost 4 feet tall, but then other years we have soybeans that are only about 2 feet tall. So in the years where it's only about 2 feet tall, they're going to be there in the morning to feed, but they're not going to bed there at night. But if it's one of the years where it's 4 feet tall, it'll be like the corn. They'll just stay there. They won't move. So it's very situational. Honestly, is the easy answer to that.
Yeah, all deer hunting seems to be situational depending on where you are and even what they do, right? Like deer aren't you can't get them down to a scientific pattern that every deer is going to do the same thing. They still have their own brain. They're going to do whatever they want, really.
Right,
Um,
and that's what I don't agree with a lot of wildlife. A lot of wildlife biologists and specifically like land managers like myself is I look at so before I go to any client's land, like they'll send me a aerial view of their land, but I'll also ask for an aerial view of their neighbors' lands. Um, say they only have two neighbors, right, and those two neighbors surround their property. I'll look at how their neighbors' lands are set up before I even look at how their land is set up, because you go basically any land specialist, they'll be like, oh well, I'm going to take a tour of your property, and then they're going to be like, you need a food plot there, a water hole there, and a bait pile there, and run cameras at all of them. It's kind of like they're just giving you like a cookie cutter answer. Well, deer hunting isn't just a one size fits all. I've gone to plenty of properties to where I'm like, quite frankly, I wouldn't run a bait pile. I would only run a food plot. Or I've also gone to properties where I'm like, honestly, you have no suitable areas for a food plot or bait pile, so you kind of just got to play to the travel corridors route to where you have to funnel deer that are traveling from your this neighbor's property to your other neighbor's property, and you got to funnel those deer into areas where you could get shots. So it's not a one size fits all. You just got to play to your neighbors, honestly.
yeah, for sure. Next on the list, we got large tracts of land produce bigger bucks. What do you think of that theory?
I don't agree with it at all. So we had on my family farm, which is about 30 acres. which in Delaware, 30 acres is a decent piece of land. But, in terms of land size for the rest of the world, 30 acres really isn't that big at all. It's actually kind of small. But we've shot a 17 point off of that land. It's not about so bucks in general, because a lot of people think that bucks have like a mile home range or whatever. Well, mature bucks, or a lot of bucks in general, but specifically mature bucks, really only have a 3 to 500 yard range. If as long as you're giving them what they need. If you It's kind of like as humans, as why would you go to the grocery store that's a half hour away when you can go to the one that's 15 minutes away? If deer have everything that they need in a small area, they don't have to leave. So we've had plenty of deer, both old bucks, young bucks, does, to where they won't go more than 300 yards because they don't have to.
Yeah, for sure. You actually just answered one of the other questions on the list. Uh, do big bucks have bigger home ranges, which we have now covered?
Yeah, no, the answer is no. I mean, as long as you're giving them, you can honestly, so with the home ranges, you can control how big their home range is. So, like, I mean, you're not going to get it down to an exact like area, but if you're giving them everything that they need within a 400-yard range, they might only travel up to 500 yards. So as long as you're giving them what they need, they're going to stay in that centralized area where you have everything.
Yeah, for sure. Make sure they're comfortable. Make sure they're fed and they feel safe. And yeah, why would you? Why would they leave? I completely agree with you. Warm weather. Do you think it shuts down the rut?
No, it doesn't at all. Actually, the deer that I shot last year, was shot when it was about 70 degrees outside. Um, I think that warm weather, it doesn't shut down the rut, and nor does it kind of amplify it. I mean, it's kind of the same way. The rut. It's basically how basically every single dude was in high school. The rut, the bucks are chasing around the does, right?
Yeah.
And just like how you know a lot of just basically how every single guy was in high school. We didn't really care. What was happening around us, or what the weather was, or anything like. We didn't care, and neither do the bucks. They're they're there to chase around. They're there to find a doe and to get the doe pregnant. They don't really care about anything else. So, and like I said, the buck that I shot last year that is hanging above my head right now, um, I shot that when it was about 70 degrees outside, and it was chasing a doe. So the answer is no, it does not.
Right on. Next one. Nocturnal bucks can't be hunted over scrapes. So if you got a buck moving and you only basically see him moving at night, do you think he could, when he does go in the daytime, will he start hitting those scrapes or no?
Um, in my experience, no. So I have had nocturnal bucks. It doesn't matter if it's a giant mammoth buck or if it's a little spike. Um, I have had bucks that when they're nocturnal and then they come out during the day, that they will check out a scrape, but they won't really, in my experience, use them. Now that's not saying that they won't, because most bucks are kind of like how most guys are. They kind of just want to do their own thing, and in my experience with bucks that were nocturnal coming out during the day, majority of the time it's um, related to the fronts. So like if you have a front coming in, they'll get out and get the food that they need before that front comes in. So that's most of the time that they come out. So um, yeah, I've had them check it out, but they don't really use it that much. It's kind of like they're there to get what they need, and then they're going to go back to their old methods.
Right on. Yeah. Yeah, I have to agree with you there too. Next one. Big bucks only rub big trees.
No, I've seen some of the biggest deer that I've ever seen in my life. They were rubbing the basically a twig. So deer. See, this is a common misconception with scrapes and rubs and all that. Is, like scrapes, for example, like, yes, it is used, as part of the mating process, but the reason why that they started is they're trying to get that velvet off their antlers. So, specifically rubs, but scrapes are also the same way. They're using a overhanging limb just to try and get the rest of the velvet off their antlers, but then they're using the scrape on the ground as part of the mating process. But, anyways, yeah, rubs. I've seen some of the biggest deer do like rub on the tiniest little saplings that are in your woods, because all they're doing with rubs is they're trying to get the rest of the velvet off, so they don't care how big the tree is, just as long as it gets the velvet off. That's all they care about.
Yeah, basically think of it as they got an itch and they don't care what they're using to scratch it. They're going to use whatever's close by type deal. Kind of a good analogy there.
Exactly, yeah. If you're in your house and you have an itch on your back, you're going to go to the nearest corner. You're not going to go to one specific corner.
Yeah, yeah. We had actually had a video on a trail cam earlier this year, a few weeks ago, where a big 8 point just using the littlest half-centimeter sapling that was growing right out by the or the bait pile that he was sitting at. So I'd have to completely agree. They'll use whatever the heck they can find. Uh, Bump bucks leave the area completely, or do they just get out of the way and continue to come back afterwards?
So um if you do the method that I've been using for so many years of putting out a 5 gallon bucket of food, like if you're running a bait pile and you're throwing out a 5 gallon bucket of food once a week, if you're doing that method, then they will come back. So the deer that I've been hunting the past, couple years, I've seen him in person and bumped him so many times, and every single time it's annoying because it's always at like 9:30 in the morning, and it's not during our season, so I can't really do anything, and it's just, it's painful seeing him. um but no, so if you use that method, they will come back. But on the other hand, if the only time you're in the woods is when you're hunting, they're not going to be used to you at all. So if that's the case, then that's when you start to run the risk of bumping that buck and him not returning. So it's as long as you're doing everything the right way, then yeah, they'll come back.
Right on, right on. Deer don't ever move during heavy wind.
um so it's not that deer won't move, it's mature deer won't move, in my experience with this. So if it's about because I've hunted days where there's zero wind, and then I've hunted days where it's like 45-mile-an-hour winds. On the days where on the days where it's about 20-ish miles an hour and above, in my experience, that's when the younger, not mature deer, that's when they move. So you'll have, for bucks, you'll have a lot of spikes and 4 points and little 6 points, and then you'll have a bunch of does. So if your only goal is to shoot a doe and or a little buck just for meat for the freezer, then there should be zero reason why you're not in a tree or in a blind hunting. But if your goal is to get a mature buck, then you might want to reconsider not even going out, because I've put hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours in trees when it's 20-plus-mile-an-hour winds, and I have yet on any of those hunts to have a mature buck step out. Not even a shooter, just a mature buck.
All right, and the last one we got on the list for today is crop rotation affecting deer movement. We've already kind of hit it, but we can go over it again, I think.
Yeah. So it really depends on what it is. So if you're talking something drastic from corn to soybeans, then yeah, that's going to affect them a lot, because like I said earlier, if when that corn's up, or even if the soybeans are tall enough, they'll get in there, they'll bed in that area, and then they'll also eat the soybeans or the corn. And the only time they'll leave is to go get a drink. But if it's something, say it's something not as drastic, like you're going from like a like soybeans to hay, or hay to soybeans, or um, you know, just something like that, to where the second plant that you're planting is about the same size as the first, it's not really going to do much. I mean, it might affect their patterns of feeding, because what a lot of people don't know, um, which I actually learned this from Jeff Sturgis, who he's a really he really knows his stuff. Deer actually feed up to 5 times a day. And these aren't exact times; they're general, times a day. But deer generally feed around 6 in the morning, 11 in the morning, 3 in the afternoon, 6 in the evening, and around like 8 at night. There's aren't specific times; there's just general time frames. Um, so basically, whatever you're planting, it might affect where they go, because basically what they do is they go from their bed to the closest food source, which is not generally the best food source for them. And then from there, then that's when they go to the big food plots or bait piles, which that's what you want on your property, is that because the second and the fourth food source are the same, and you want that food source on your property. That's where you want to have the high nutrition, high protein, high fat content food for them, to where they're going to grow and just stay healthy, throughout the whole year. That's where you want your property to be. And then the third and the fifth are also the same, but it's also the same as the first. They're not, the best quality foods. That's where you have like um, your woody shrub tips, your acorns and stuff like that. It's things that are harder to digest for them, that aren't necessarily the most protein rich. So as long as it's not drastic, it's not going to be a big difference. Like, as long as you're not going from corn to hay. But if it is drastic, then yes, it will change it.
Yeah, I've actually noticed it on our property this year. So part of the property gets rented out to a farmer, and for years he's just a cattle farmer, and he's only ever planted corn for years. Just takes it off for silage, cuts it early, whatever. And this year he quit using that field. It got rented out to someone else, and they put beans in. And you see a lot more deer movement during the day now. Before, when it was corn, it was like you said earlier. They just laid there. They stayed in that field, near that field. But now, with the beans in there and less cover for them, we get them moving around a lot more through the woods during the day, back and forth from the beans to bedding type deal. So I think the rotation does play a part in it. And again, it just comes down to the cover. So if they're using corn for the cover crop, they're just going to stay there. But if they switch to beans or wheat, they're going to move around a lot more, from trying to find different bedding areas and back and forth from the bedding to the food source. So, all right, Joey. Uh, it's been great talking to you. You had a lot of good information today. Thanks for coming and hanging out with us for 46 minutes so far.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm always down to do more of these if you ever want to.
Yeah, for sure, man. Yeah, you got a lot of good info. I'm really enjoying the conversations we're having, so I'll definitely have you back on for sure. All right, man. You have a good night or a good day, and I'm gonna get back to my Thanksgiving festivities with the family here, and we'll talk later.
All right, sounds good, man. Thank you.
All right, bye.